Welcome back to Basic Bananas Radio, where we share tried and tested ways to grow your brand and get more customers. Everything from the latest in marketing and branding, right through to growing your team and creating an irresistible culture.
Hi there and welcome back. I just had the coolest, most insightful discussion with my dear friend Suzy Jacobs on the topic of how to get unstuck. And there were so many insights. I can't wait to share it with you. It will explain why you may sometimes feel a little stuck, or why in some situations you may feel triggered more than in others, and how to deal with that. I learned so much, and I feel like this is such a timely episode right now, and I can't wait to share it with you. So let's jump straight in. Hey, Suzy, so great to see you.
So much fun, Francisca, after all this time.
I know we've met about, I would say, a decade ago when I was speaking at one of your events.
I know. I was thinking about it the other day at the old Greengate Hotel.
Yeah.
And I think you and Christo were only just starting out back then.
Yeah, we started
And
15 years ago. So yeah, we were probably quite green still.
yeah.
And then, so that was like about a decade ago, maybe even longer. And then just last month, you and I were living it up in Kuala Lumpur in this at a board meeting that we're both on the board of for Entrepreneurs Organization.
Yeah.
And with our own pool in the room. And
Oh my God. And the best food. I ate for 4 days.
Yeah.
I thought the
Yeah.
food was fantastic. And
Malaysian
beautiful people
food.
there.
Oh, the people, the hospitality, the food, everything was amazing.
Yeah.
Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about how to get unstuck. Now, before we get into your topic of expertise, I'd love to just hear a little bit about your journey. You've been self-employed since 19.
I know.
What were you doing at 19, and what did your journey look like?
I was a rebel. I didn't fit inside the structure that was available to people at that time to start their career. And on one hand, you could say I was kind of lost. I had no idea what I was doing. So I just had to make it up as I was going along. And I don't think I was a very structured sort of corporate-y type to start with. And then as life rolled on, I became less and less corporate-y. So I was always about me finding my own fuel, my own motivation, my own ideas to be self-employed. So that's how it all rolled out.
And what was your first business at 19? I know you were also a model.
Oh my God, Francisca. Yes, I was. But that was at age, like I was literally pulled off a train once when I was about 13 years of age to go and model for Clio magazine. And
Wow.
I can't think of it, what's his name? George Negus, I think, was the centerfold for that particular issue. Oh my God, that was Clio magazine a long time ago. So yes, I did. The first business I ever went into was manufacturing furniture. My partner, who then became my husband for 25 years, it was a great creative human being, and he was designing and manufacturing furniture here in Sydney, and I got involved in his business. I was doing all the customer service, he was doing all the sales, and we just nailed it, and we're doing great business with all the big furniture retailers at the time. So that was my first entree into it. And then I went and set up a health and wellness studio over in London. While I was there, I found this thing called networking that I was using to go build my business over there. And this was a women's only business networking organization. And so I approached the owner of it and I said, hey, how about I take it back to Australia? And so I launched the Athena Network back in 2008, which then morphed into She Business, which I sold in 2017. And then really have just focused on coaching, training, education ever since.
Yeah, and one of the things that you're really good at and what you're really helping people with is getting unstuck. And I could, list more than a handful of people right now, friends, members of Basic Bananas, that are feeling stuck. I'd like for you to walk us through the process to help people. First, I'd love to know what is usually underneath that stuckness. Why are people stuck?
So let me get to that answer in a second, right? So how do you even know that you're stuck? So I always give people a formula. It's like, I want ... but ... And there's an excuse or a reason or something that's going on that is keeping them from following through on what they would like to do. So there's your first insight. I'm stuck. And so in business, what I find, or in business, what I find it is for people is like they've lost of motivation, they've lost direction, they're second guessing themselves, they're feeling uncertain about what the future holds, which is not surprising considering the kind of market conditions we've been encountering over the last couple of years. So when we have those market conditions, it's kind of easy to go, well, this is the reason why I feel so stuck, because the market conditions are so bad. And I am not for one moment saying that they are not tricky, they're not complex. There's a lot of uncertainty that goes with it. But as we know, you can still succeed. In fact, there are sometimes greater opportunities in an uncertain market. So so once you kind of understand that you're stuck, it's like, well, what is keeping me stuck? If it's not the external circumstances, what is it? And we all carry a story, Francisca, and because it's our inner story that we've lived with for most of our life and we've inherited from previous generations in our family, it's such a snug fit for us. We don't actually notice that that story is holding us back. It can be outdated. As I said, it's inherited. And if you imagine that your story is like your operating system. And so you're walking around on planet Earth with this operating system, which is functioning more like DOS, because it's old, it's outdated. There are some glitches in the operating system. And you could be using AI instead for your operating system. So that's a sort of an analogy that I give people. It's like you're operating on DOS and you could be running on AI. And what that is people's story. And so that's what keeps people stuck. It shows up as habits and behaviors and attitudes. And most of the time, people try and change those habits, behaviors, and attitudes, but never address the story. And unless you address the story, those habits, behaviors, and attitudes will continually continue to recur. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let's go practical. So let's say I'm a business owner and I love that formula. I would like to grow, but the market is not right, for example, right? And now you go like, okay, so you're stuck. And now we go, okay, habits, etc., behaviors. Well, maybe if I spend an hour a day on marketing, maybe that will fix it. But then I realized actually it doesn't fix it because there's a story. You will suddenly talk to me like, actually, Francisca, there's a story underneath. And I go, wait a second, I don't think I deserve the success, right?
Yes.
Is that sort of
That's exactly right. But here's the sneaky thing about a story. So if I give you an example, I was working with a client. She was a luxury and is a luxury travel agent. Loves her business, has been doing it for years. She had been doing some coaching with me. This was a few years ago, and we were talking about her business. She came to me and she said, look, I think it's time for me to just pull back a bit. I'm going to slow things down. And I was like, how? Why? And she said, look, my husband thinks I should be spending more time at home and more time with the kids. And so we started digging into what was keeping her stuck. Why was she going to make a decision about her future based on what somebody else's opinion was about her? And what we discovered through that process is that when she was a kid living in rural New Zealand, she grew up listening and watching her mum, and her mum was a stay-at-home mother. And her mother had old-fashioned ideas based on her parents' ideas. And that was that a woman's place was in the home. Now, my client, at the age of 45 that she was, doesn't actually think that a woman's place is in the home. But that's not who's running the show. Who's running the show is her story. And until she knows her story and understands the beliefs behind that story, she will give away her power and be taken in different directions by other people's opinions and judgments because she feels the conflict and the contradiction but doesn't understand the source of it. So once we were able to go back, find within her story, man, I've inherited this belief from my mother that my my role is in the home. So as soon as my husband says, hey, you should be spending more time at home, she starts feeling guilty that she's doing the wrong thing and goes, well, if I'm feeling guilty, it must be that I should be in the home, not in my business. And was about to make that decision, which would have changed the trajectory of her life forever. And so you dig in, she starts to understand what her story is, what were the influences, how it was formed, what beliefs she's chosen to take on about herself, others, and the world. And when you do that, when you come to a decision point and you're unsure, you can unpack your story, make sure that's not in your way so that you can take action based on who you are today and follow your dreams, goals, and desires.
I think that's the most important, most fundamental thing we can all work on is understanding our stories, the stories that we've been telling ourselves all our life. And I think, and I'd like to run this past you, and then I'd like for you to take us through the whole process. I'd like to run this past you. I obviously believe that we unconsciously make up any story, and it can be anything, because let's say I grow up in the same household, and this lady is, let's say, Jenny goes unconsciously, yeah, I guess as a woman I'm meant to do that. I grew up in the same household, and I might tell myself a story of, I never want to be like my mom, and so I will do everything. So if my partner comes and says, you need to stay at home, I will go, you know what, stuff that somewhere else, I'm never gonna, so I think it's interesting. And I wonder, yeah, what do you think about that, and why are some of us going this way and others going this way with the exact same upbringing?
So it is, it depends on what so I use philosophy for the way I think a lot of the time. So if you listen to someone like Simone de Beauvoir, she says that we're born as nothing, and we're always becoming something, right? But if you go back to and I love that example, you can have two people grow up in the same household taking two very different directions, which is why it is so important for you to know your story, and how it's so important for you to make your decisions, because nobody else was there when you were growing up, experienced your life the way you did. I say to people, there are 5 truths of story. The first one is your perspective, your story about life is as unique as your DNA. So if you don't know it, you cannot expect to be able to communicate your greatest needs, desires, and wants to anyone else, let alone understand yourself. Truth number 2, your story is an interpretation. It is not fact. Not fact. So you've got to be able to understand that. Truth number 3, self-awareness is not knowing who you are. Self-awareness is the distance that you can put between yourself and your story, so that you can observe it objectively and understand why you made that story and that interpretation, and how you came to have those beliefs, so that you're empowered to, truth number 4, upgrade your story to match your greatest goals, dreams, and desires. Truth number 5 is that your story was designed to keep you safe, but sometimes it keeps you stuck. Absolutely. And that's where compassion and understanding for yourself stems from, because you understand that you're in survival mode. If you think back to when you were, tiny little bub coming out of your mummy's womb, all gooey-eyed and looking up into the world, and nobody says to you, hey, what you're interpreting is not the truth. It's just a version of the truth. And you're trying to get your needs met, and you're trying to survive, and you're looking externally for approval and validation and love. Nobody tells you any of that. So you grow up believing that your interpretation is the truth, and it's not. So those 5 truths of story are a great guide for anyone. But number 1 is your perspective is just as unique as your DNA. If you start there, and then go looking, start exploring, get excited and interested in who you are, and remember it's not the truth, just an interpretation.
So powerful. Why have you thought about why are 2 people, let's say twins in the same family, experiencing the same things at that young age, able to choose completely different stories? Obviously something in the brain. Is it neuroscience? Is it philosophy? But where, I know you draw from existentialism, you draw from different thinking models. What do you think?
So when it comes to when you think about the brain, if the brain is interpreting, right? And so if you go back to the cognitive revolution 100,000 years ago, it's the time that the human brain starts to evolve. And instead of just reacting to reality, right, we start being able to interpret it. So imagine yourself out on the plains of Africa and suddenly you can interpret reality. So there is now a past, there's a future, and you start trying to work out what the wildebeest running towards you means. And so we're hardwired to be scanning the environment for threats and for danger. And just how every human being does that is different because we're just uniquely different. You'd have to speak to somebody else about all the component parts that make us different. But if you just think about the idea that what we're doing is interpreting, and you know that your makeup is that unique, we're just taking on a different interpretation of it.
Yeah.
We're seeing different things. We're scanning the environment, seeing different things.
And we make up everything. Everything is made up. You know, I had a great lunch yesterday with a dear friend of mine, and she said, I will never share my bed with anyone again. You know, even when I have a new partner, I'm like, I don't quite know who made up this idea that sharing a bed is a good idea. I mean, does anyone sleep better next to someone? Maybe it's very small percentage, but it's all made up. You know, everything we do, how we drive on the right side or the left side, or that I have to wear a dress or can wear a dress, but men can't wear a dress. Like, it's all made up. And I find this so fascinating.
And some of it's useful and some of it's not. And this is the stuff. So if we're stuck, there is a story that was designed to keep you safe and now it's keeping you stuck. Your job is to go find what that story is and challenge it. If it's not supporting you, get rid of it. We've got one short, sweet life. And if you can be taught, and this is what we were talking about earlier, is I actually teach people how to change, because I don't want my clients to spend the next 5 years reading self-help books and having to go and see a coach every week. I want them to be able to understand how they operate, how they can change for themselves, so they can get out there and live on purpose, right? Which is why I deliver that program, Unstuck, in 12 weeks. So if you then go, okay, so I've got this story, now what?
And so can I quickly go back to story? So let's say somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm stuck, but I don't quite know what my story is. Obviously, I don't know what's the first thing that they can do.
Okay, so you've always got macro and micro stories on going on in your head. One of the first things we need to do is stop filling our brains with TV and podcasts, and we have to take the time to notice what is going on inside our head. That does take a little bit of quiet time. So if you've always got something infiltrating your brain, you can't listen to what's going on. I talk about story mapping. There are 7 layers of a story. The most superficial layer, Franziska, is language. So just notice what words, what language you're using. And when you start hearing the words, I can't, I have to, I need to, I should, they won't let me, this is too hard, you know that you've got a story going on that is an unhelpful story. It is not supporting you going towards your greatest dreams, goals, and desires. See, there's a story going on. That's the first thing you do. Secondly, if you know how to story map, which is the process I take people through, you can then unpack each level of your story, and it's almost like you process it to 0, so you're back at ground level, right? If you're in a meeting and you can feel a story going on, because our stories get triggered obviously under high stress situations or any stressful situations. We're all good when we're sitting on a beach in Bali zenning out and we go, oh my God, I feel so fantastic. And that's why our goals seem so reachable when we're in low stress situations. As soon as we get into high stress, back home, back into the office, right? We're being triggered again. And so our story goes off. If you're in a meeting, for instance, and your story's going off and your confidence plummets and you can feel your sympathetic nervous system firing off and you can't find your words, you don't have time to story map and get yourself unstuck of a story. So you need some short-term goals, which are just basic things that you can do to stop a story in its tracks. So one is you identify it. So you can hear the I can't, I have to, I need, oh my God, this isn't working, that kind of story. Second, you intercept it. And a really easy way to intercept is by using your physicality, your body to do that. Because what you're trying to do is calm down the sympathetic nervous system. So it's block breathing, in for 4, out for 4, simple act of relaxing your shoulders. One of the simplest things that you can do, if you just turn up the corners of your mouth, you send a message to your brain that delivers dopamine. That calms down the sympathetic nervous system. You breathe. You tell yourself, remember, my story is not the truth. It just feels like it. And by that time, you've calmed down and you can then anchor to your values. And I talk a lot to people about conscious identity, and conscious identity starts with your values. And it's really, if you think about the story that you've inherited or the stories that you carry, the you who is sitting with me today has an unconscious identity that was formed within that story. Well, if you're going to intercept that story, you need something to anchor to ground yourself to. So I work with clients to develop their conscious identity, and that is your values, your purpose, and your goals, and make sure they're all aligned.
Great. And then so talking about the process, so know your story, unpack your story, and then stop
identify,
yeah,
intercept,
yeah,
anchor, and then act. Right? So identify your story. I can hear the narrative. I can hear it's not useful. Know you've got a story. If you're in a meeting in that moment, you want to do a short-term intercept, which is using your physicality to breathe, to relax, lift the corners of your mouth, allow your sympathetic nervous system to calm down, and give your executive functioning brain a chance to step back in. If you notice that the same story goes on and on and on, and it keeps repeating itself, you know you are stuck in a story. And at the heart of that story, you still believe that story is the truth. That's when you need to learn how to story map. And as I said, it's narrative, it's feelings, it's drama, it's judgment, it's truth, it's fact. You process out each of those elements till you get back to zero. You ground yourself. So you anchor is step 3. You anchor to your values. And our values in my books are the independently chosen principles that I choose to live life by. So that's a conscious choice here today for me to value things which are important to my life. So that for me, that's connection, growth, adventure, justice, love. That's it. So I anchor to, might be growth. And I go, great, who I am is growth. And I anchor to that as I, in that meeting, then deliver whatever it is I want to deliver. And so the practice, because there are only two ways you're ever going to change. Either you have a crisis in your life, or you start practicing and you start making progress. There are no other ways. It doesn't happen by good luck, good fortune. It's either crisis or practice. And so the practice part is once you understand what's going on and you understand what your story is doing and how to exit out of your story, the practice is about being able to align your thoughts, your feelings and actions to your conscious identity in the moments that matter. And as time goes on, you get faster and more masterful at doing that. And before you know it, you are perfectly aligned, conscious identity, with the way you behave, the way you speak, the way you act. And that is the seat of authenticity.
Yeah. Wow. I couldn't agree more. And on the values bit, I've lived this for ages, and I even got them tattooed on my hand, my 5 values, just so I see them every day. And they're just symbols. They're not even words. They're just symbols that I understand. Nobody else, everyone else thinks it's nice hand decoration, but they're my 5 values. And
love that.
I don't want to advertise that here, so don't go out and get your values tattooed. But for me, I look at my hand, I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm
Love
about.
that.
This is how I want to live. And
And if you don't want to tattoo them, I say to everyone, you should be able, they should roll off your tongue because
yeah,
this is who you say you are in life. And that's a powerful statement. So it's
oh,
not 20 values, it's no more than 3 to 5 values. And they're there because it's who you are.
I think it's one of the most important pieces of work that any human can do, whether in business or not. Suzy, what is one story that you have come across maybe in the last few years that you go, oh, hello, what's this story doing here? That is not serving you.
Of my own?
Yeah, of your own.
Oh, um, so we all carry stories, right? And if you understand anything about epigenetics, we also carry not only our stories, but the inherited stories. And
Yeah.
my father was an only child. He survived World War II. He was born in Czechoslovakia, and 67 members of his family died at the hands of the Nazis. And so he made his way to Australia as an only child. And where he met my mother, who was a Kiwi, who was dumped in a boarding school at age 7. And so these two quite hurt people came together long enough to have 4 kids and then spent the rest of their life hurting each other. And this is the problem with the stories that we don't heal, right? Hurt people, then go on to hurt people. Anyway, what I never realized about myself, Francisca, is even though I was social and I had built communities around me, I never felt like I belonged. And so I would go into, I'm in relationship after I was married for 25 years, and then I was building a new relationship. And I just kept wanting to exit this relationship. And there were things that he would do that when I'd asked him for something simple, like, can you make sure you make the bed? And he wouldn't make the bed. I would just get really worked up about not making the bed. And I'm like, right, there is something going on here. And I've got some great tools. One of them is morning pages, which is one of my absolute favorites. So I start stream of consciousness, writing about it. And within a couple of days, bam, there it is. My story is I don't belong. And I don't belong because neither of my parents belonged. And they brought their hurt and their pain with them into not only to Australia, but it's passed down into the next generation. And my relationship would have come to a standstill because for as long as I don't feel as though I don't belong and believe I don't belong in that relationship, I don't belong. And then I've always got one foot out and one foot in. And that doesn't make for a safe and secure relationship.
So how did you then work on that story to change it?
So then this is the amazing thing about our brain, right? Once we can see the story and we can see how that story came into being, it's then our job, our responsibility to go, is that true? To challenge the story. Is it true I don't belong? Or does it just feel as though I don't belong? And the truth is, I do belong in that relationship. That's a choice I'm making. I choose to belong in that relationship. But until I can spot the story that's keeping me stuck, I've got no idea why I'm acting like a crazy woman about a bed not being made. It's like, this seems to be disproportionate to what's going on here. But the moment I spot it, I'm empowered to make a choice about what I do with it. And that's my choice. Now, over 50 something years, I've created a habit of responding to that story like it's the truth. So now I've got work to do to remind myself it's not the truth. It's a story. It kept me safe when I was young and felt like an outsider at school. But now I'm not. And so my job is to remind myself and to start rewiring my neurons. And if you go back to that great early work by Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself, if ever you're in doubt about whether you can change, go read that book. Stroke victims can train their brain, new parts of their brain, to deal with the part of their body that was no longer working. I mean, if that ain't proof that your brain is malleable and you can train it to do what you want, I don't know what is.
And that actually leads me, it's so powerful. I think this whole episode, people are going to get so much out of it. I know it's a slightly different topic. It's probably the most important one, even when it comes to marketing, because without having this, all the rest is just, the sprinkles that don't really work, because we need to have the bottom layer of the cake needs to be solid.
Solid, but also this, Franziska, with the advent of AI, there's so much fakery out there. If you come back to what I was saying earlier on about if you have carefully, consciously considered values, purpose, and goals to describe as the pillars of who your conscious identity is, and then you can practice the process of aligning your thoughts, feelings, and actions to those values, purpose, and goals, you have authenticity.
Yeah.
And if there is something that personal brands will benefit from, isn't it like authenticity is it? I mean, man, we're aching for it.
Now more than ever. And I was just actually writing, I published a post on this yesterday. It's exactly that. The brands are becoming so generic because of AI, because they don't have alignment of values, purpose, goals, and everyone becomes the same. And that's the death of a brand, is sameness. And so I love that. This is such a timely conversation. Last question, and you've already mentioned one book. What's one book what's one of your favorite books? You mentioned The Brain That Changes Itself. What are some other books that you would like to recommend?
Okay, so now I wish I'd known that you were going to ask me that, because I've read one recently, in fact, about personality. And so this idea that people like to label themselves, because the brain is always trying to simplify the world, because it's our biggest organ in our body. It takes 20% of our energy. So it's always looking to simplify. I read a book on personalities, and you are not your personality. I read that recently and I loved it. I love Sapiens.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
Sapiens.
I will send it to you so you've got it. Sapiens really gave me my grounding in the cognitive revolution and the idea about how the brain works and how we're interpreting. I loved that book. I've always got, what else have I got? The latest Simone de Beauvoir, the book about who you are. I'm going to have to send you all of these.
Yeah,
I'll send you a list.
Yes, and we'll
put them in the show notes.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And lastly, where can people connect with you? How can people find you? LinkedIn, your website? What would you like us to?
And it's always suzyjacobs.com. So you'll find me, or Suzy Jacobs on LinkedIn. My website's the same. Just put that into Google and you'll find me.
We'll pop that in the show notes. And Suzy is spelled Suzy, so slightly different. SuzyJacobs.com, and we'll pop it in the show notes. Hey, Suzy, so good to see you as always.
Likewise.
Yeah, I just feel like this is such a timely conversation. People need to hear this, and I can't wait to get it out there.
Thanks, Franziska. Thank you, everyone. It's been great conversation.
Love it. And you, the listener, thank you for tuning in. Without you, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have this conversation. So thank you for tuning in continuously and for sharing this episode, hopefully, with a mate who needs to hear this. So thanks again, and see you next time.
To get more from Basic Bananas and to learn new ways to grow your business with clever marketing, visit basicbananas.com.